Word. How do you have so much space? How do you have so much space on your phone?
I delete them. Welcome to another great episode of Life in the Pocket. I'm Hunter. We have McCaslin and we have Coleman here.
Hey,
with loads of excitement for the next episode. This should be episode number 39, but knowing this, that probably because I gave it a number, we're probably going to push it back to like 46.
Nice.
Anyways,
Yeah.
go ahead and follow us on Apple Podcasts. I'm not saying it. You know what to do. Wherever you're listening, just do what you need to do to make sure that you know when we post more episodes.
What's our Patreon URL?
I think it's patreon.com/litp, but let me verify that.
Could you verify it for us, Hunter?
Yes, patreon.com/LITP. That's litp, LITP. You can go and become a patron. Our patrons are really the only reason that we have this show. Okay, that sounded bad. Are the actual funding reasons for the show being possible, that made possible by our patrons at patreon.com. But when you're a patron, you get other benefits and insight into things that we don't normally post on social media, like when McCaslin or Coleman says bad things that we can't post.
About hover rounds. You know who you are.
So, yeah, do those things. We're continuing the series on the Deconstruction podcast with our construction stories. You've probably just heard McCaslin's, and now you'll hear Coleman's. If you want to hear more about it, or if you're just now tuning in, just look at the podcast. It talks about the link and Rhett and Link Deconstruction.
That sounded so weird to say them backwards.
Rhett and Link Deconstruction. You'll see my construction story follows shortly after, but there's some episodes in between. So, quarantine hit and things got crazy.
Yeah,
Super crazy.
we had to stay relevant. You know,
Relevant.
get those
Yeah.
out of here, man.
Dude, I had to finish mine before I had to start talking.
Yeah, go
Golly,
ahead.
I don't know why. They must have been sitting there for a minute because they're kind of dry, you know? And every time I'd eat one, I felt like I was doing the saltine challenge. Have y'all ever tried to do that? It's
No.
actually impossible. It's like you have to eat like 7 saltines and like everything gone in your mouth by like 30 seconds or a minute or something.
That sounds terrible.
It's kind of like the cinnamon challenge.
Yikes! What about a cinnamon saltine challenge? Good luck with that.
Yeah, you're going to die. Yeah.
All right. Well, you know, we got any buffer? I mean, do we want to
That's what I was
just do we want to
wondering. I
act
don't wanna
dumb
just
for a
jump.
few minutes,
Yeah.
or do we just want to jump right in?
I was going to tell you this, which McCaslin's going to hate because he hates it anytime we talk about it. And then when I say it, he's going to be like, I don't hate that. Anyways, I predicted you just like the Rhett and Link people did. I've been doing a lot of research on Enneagrams.
I actually do.
Nice.
Hate that. I do
Let's
hate
go.
it. So there's a
Dang it.
curveball. Yeah,
Let's go.
Mr. Smart
What'd
Guy.
you research?
Just
So
kidding.
I figured out my wing.
Okay.
I'm a 4-wing. I
3.
forgot.
Wing 3. It's either 3 or 5.
Yeah, I know. I think I'm a 4-wing 5.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds right. And so what that means is even though I deal with emotions heavily,
Heavenly.
I'm not a very emotional person on the outside.
Yeah.
So like when things happen, it's so internal that somehow with it being so internal, I block it on the outside. So like I would hate girlfriends around Christmas time because I'd have to go to their parents or whoever's house, and their parents would ultimately get me some type of gift, whatever it was, and like I show no emotion. So it's not like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for this gift. I'm just like,
Wow.
thanks. And then it ultimately looks like
You're
Like
an
you're a
ungrateful
jerk, yeah.
little punk.
Yeah.
so.
Wow.
Wow. That's good stuff.
Wow.
I still think that I'm an advocate for employees of a business or staff members of a organization for their office little nameplate to have their Enneagram. People do this, but I'm advocating for it. I wish that everybody in my workplace would take the Enneagram test and that we could display them on our nameplates to where when you're walking in somebody's office to talk to them about something, you know, like what you're getting, you know, like, you know what you're walking into as far as like how they handle things. Like, even if it's like a negative, could be a negative experience, like, you know, how they handle conflict and how they typically interact with the other types and stuff. I just think that would be super helpful because interactions with other people are not my thing. I don't like to interact with other people on a normal, like, if in general, this quarantine has kind of been like, sure, there's inconveniences, but it's kind of been in my comfort zone a little bit, which is kind of weird. Like, I kind of tend to
Coleman started
sit
the
at home.
coronavirus.
Yeah, no. I tend to kind of be at home in my bubble anyway, unless I'm kind of forced out by work or whatever. So this has kind of been pretty normal for me. Like, it hasn't been like excruciating for me to not be around people and, like, you know, not talk to people. Like, I saw somebody the other day and they were like, man, I just like the first week of quarantine, like, they stayed home, and then from then on they just like still went and did whatever. Like, you can't do a lot of normal things, but they still went and interacted with a bunch of people and stuff. And I'm just like, it's not that important to me. Like, I can not talk to people and be fine.
Yeah, but I was like watching a lot of other podcasts about like them interviewing people that are my same number and things that they'll tell you how you resort to certain things of other numbers when you're in, like, when you're healthy or not healthy. And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
So
Weird.
One of the things is you overthink things. Well, okay, I know everybody overthinks things, but in the simplest form of that, thinking will cause you to, like, basically you lost before you ever started type thing.
Yeah.
So this guy was telling a story, and it was so similar to my story that I was like, this is weird. So he's like, I played baseball, and I played baseball. So I was like, I'm interested.
Tight.
So he's like, I was a catcher, and I was really good at it until one day I just had this thought, and I was like, what if I overthrow the second baseman? Because, you know, when they steal second, you got to throw it.
Yeah.
And so he's like, ever since I did that, that's all I thought about was, like, I really hope they don't steal because then I'm going to have to throw it second, and I might overthrow them. And if I overthrow it, and, like,
then
so he said all
Yeah.
of those emotions would hit me, and it'd basically cripple me to the point of I would hesitate, or if I did throw it, I would end up overthrowing it. And so I played third base. My concern was never catching the ball. My concern was never getting to the ball fast enough, or if they hit it to me, or any of that.
First base.
It was, what if I overthrow the first baseman? And I sucked every day after that. So it was kind of crazy.
It's weird because it's just so interesting because there are thoughts like that cripple me,
hot.
but they what was that? Is that a piece of ice?
DB.
Oh, okay.
Like, don't pay attention to that, you know.
The thought that I had, like, in like similar situations, like if I was playing sports or whatever, it was my team. If I let my team down, they're gonna be so disappointed in me.
Yeah, and that's not even on my radar.
Yeah, so like, or if I strike out, like, my whole family has come out to see me, and they're gonna like
That's not my son.
Their trip out to, like, watch me play baseball is, like, so wasted. If I strike out, guess what I always did? Freaking always struck out.
That's my boy. Come on, Coleman, you got this. Strike 3. Dang, your son struck out. That's not my son.
You're walking home.
Yeah,
that's
so
not my
it's just
son.
interesting. Mash, what type are you again? A 3? 4? 3
no.
or 4?
So I've taken it a few times, and, like, basically I took it and I got a 3 the first time, but then somebody was like, you're not a 3. So I took it again and got a 1. So I don't know.
Interesting.
Probably a 1, maybe. I don't know.
Okay. Well, it's kind of an interesting segue into my story because that's a little bit of an insight into kind of who I am and what kind of made me that way, which is kind of what these construction stories are. If you think about a construction site, you start with
foundation.
with a foundation, and you start building walls, and then eventually you've got a structure.
Wow.
And that's what we're trying to talk about, is how we got to this point where I think all three of us would say there's nothing that could happen to us that, or any information that we would receive that would shake this foundational faith that we have in Christ. Am I correct in assuming that?
Good.
So
Good.
we're basically taking these events that have happened in our life, breaking them or building them from the start into what is now what we would call an unshakable, not unshakable, but unbreakable,
destroyable.
Yeah, sure, okay. Faith. So I'm gonna start. My story starts pretty similar to Mash's, I would say. I grew up. My dad's been a minister / pastor basically my entire life since I was like very, very young. My earliest memories were at a church in South Bossier. He was what they called music minister, worship pastor, whatever you want to call it, that role. And so, unlike Bash's, I was in the church every second it was open.
So you think you're better than me?
No, I don't think I'm better than you. I will say I do disagree with the sentiment, which it's not just your dad that carries it, but that if you force your kids to go to church, they're going to resent church, which it does happen.
Yeah.
It's not something that doesn't happen, but I don't think it's the rule, you know?
No, yeah.
Because I was in church literally every second that it was open. Because my dad, if church was open, there was probably music, and if there was music, I was there because my dad was there. And even if there wasn't music, my dad was there, and that usually meant that I had to be there too. So I grew up very familiar with the gospel story. I was very familiar with just, why were we doing this church thing? Like, I was never, like, from a young age, I can remember even before I got saved, like, I knew the story of Jesus. I knew why he came and died on the cross, even before I had professed my faith in him. I knew what all this was about. Like, I wasn't a stranger to this idea. So I can remember when I did make the decision, it was kind of when I made the decision to get saved, to accept the love that Christ had for me and spend eternity with him. I was kind of like, how have I not done this already, kind of thing. Like, because I knew this whole story, but it was kind of like Mash said, the realization of I have sin, I need God, and I don't want to ever not be with God. So I'm gonna put my faith in him. And that was when I was 5. So I did beat you on that front, Mash. I was 1 year.
Gosh darn it.
And my dad baptized me.
6 I can understand, but 5,
Yeah, I probably wasn't real.
I get it. We're gonna get there.
Kind of
I'm just
fake.
kidding.
Seems fake.
So I was 5. I got baptized. I was like kind of Mash explained. Like, I was aware. I was aware of what that meant. Like, I knew what I was doing. I didn't fully have I didn't have an, as I guess, great of an understanding of sin as like an adult might have, but I knew what sin was. I knew I had it, and I knew I didn't want it anymore. So I got saved, got baptized, went down to the front of the church, walked down there with my parents, and said the prayer, did all that. So I was saved. I was changed. And like we talked about last episode, probably on the outside, there probably wasn't a whole lot of fruit to that. Not at least visually if you were looking at my life. Fast forward a few years. So my dad that cut ties with that church, long, messy story there. That's another recurring theme in my story, is that the church is messed up because the church is full of people that mess up. And I think that argument and that was a part of Rhett and Link's story that I was kind of just like, it encapsulates kind of like a cultural attitude towards the church right now, which is that churches can't, God can't be real because we go to church to worship God, and in these churches are all these, hypocrites, right? And so none of it's real. And so, I mean, I've grown up in the thick of what I would call church, like at its sometimes at its worst. Some of the churches I grew up in, like the first one, I'm not going to go into detail on all of them, but this one, I know no one's going to listen to this and be offended that I told this story. First one, the pastor more or less tried to forge documents to where the land that the church was on was in his name, and then attempted to sell it and take that money and leave town, basically.
Oh, take the money and run.
So, my dad was instrumental in taking that issue to court and stopping that.
Nice.
So a lot of hurt there. Like church split, obviously. Church, became not a thing anymore. Dad lost his job, all that. So kind of just a hurtful time for us to be in that church. Whatever. I was really young, so I don't fully remember it, but I can just remember it being a rough time. Fast forward a few years, Dad got we kind of bounced around. Well, no, this was pretty soon after that. We went to several different churches in kind of temporary roles that my dad played, and then ended up kind of sticking at another church in Shreveport, and he was the worship minister again. And we stayed there for several years. That's probably, aside from like where I'm at now, and like if church, I'm trying to figure out how to word this because it's kind of sensitive, but that was a good church experience is what I'm trying to say. We stayed there for several years, and then I guess the Lord kind of called my dad to First Bossier, which we had never been. My parents had gone there before we were born, but it's where they met. It's where they got married. So they went back, and we all went back, but we obviously didn't know anybody there as kids, me and my siblings. And so my brother was already in high school, so I didn't even have my brother there with me. I was in middle school. There were two separate ministries at that time. So knew nobody, was immediately kind of, when either of your parents are on staff at a church, you kind of have to do the things like go to youth group and go to camp and go to all these things. Went to camp, knew nobody, literally no one. My roommate I had met on the bus ride there. And
was it Jay Pizzle?
No. I wish it was. That would have been a really fun thing.
If that
would have been a really fun part of the story.
Ignited the friendship.
Literally, the person that I room with, we're not friends. Like after that time, we weren't like. That sounded harsh, but like we just didn't really become friends. So, and he was a weird guy, kind of just an odd cat, and so I had nobody at camp, knew no one. Like, and this was like a week of camp, I guess, 4 or 5 days away. And I'm kind of like Mash. I'm shy. I don't really make friends super easily because I'm not super outgoing. And we're at the beach. This is a beach camp. I'm in middle school. Okay, so I know no one. So literally, I'm insecure. I'm out of shape, insecure. We're at the beach. Can't go have fun in the ocean because those kids might judge me for what I look like. I don't know anyone. All these thoughts torment my 6th grade brain. Okay,
Absolutely.
Well, it's actually the summer before 6th grade.
Even worse.
So, because I had been in Bossier schools, but none of my friends from school went to my church. So I just knew no one. I remember the last night of camp, I was just like, it had been a good week of like, I guess, ministry. Like it was a good, like I was impacted spiritually, but again, I was so lonely. I didn't know anybody. Like it was just like it was a really sad week. And so I remember there was the end of camp. They like called everybody. Like the worship service was, the sermon had already happened. Like the big call to action had already happened. And it was the worship leader. They were doing worship after. They said like, we can all come down to the front and like just kind of fill the altar area, kind of classic. And I just didn't go because like I didn't want to like go down there and not know anybody. So I just like sat in my seat. And this is like a really sad story, but I mean it was just like the most lonely and like sad that I had ever been because I didn't have anybody. And I remember like kind of coming to the realization that I wasn't, this is sounding super cheesy, but I wasn't alone, like that I had Jesus and I had the Lord in my heart so that I didn't have to feel lonely. And I asked the Lord to just like give me peace and be my comfort in that situation. And he was, and it was like a really real, just authentic encounter with the Lord where I once was like super lonely and depressed and like he was my joy and my comfort in that situation. So it was a good situation. After that, I kind of made some friends, and it was fun. I wasn't a little loner kid anymore. I'm reading off a list of things here, so I don't forget stuff. I have always been around music because my dad was a worship pastor. I loved music. Like I wasn't really exposed to a bunch of different genres, but I listened to like gospel worship stuff my whole life because I was in the church 2-3 times a week and we were always singing it. So I was always around it. And I knew I liked it, but I didn't really know what to do with that. I had taken some guitar lessons, quit because my fingers hurt. Had taken a few drum lessons and like was okay at it, but like I could play like a simple beat, but like I never really took it anywhere. Didn't really put practice to it. So high school comes around, and our youth pastor had a really good youth pastor, by the way. That's another key point in my story. We had a really good youth group. Well, let me rephrase this. We had really good leadership.
Who was your youth pastor?
His name was Will Guyton.
Sounds
He
familiar.
now pastors in Arkansas. But anyway, he was a really good youth pastor. We had really good leaders. A lot of the kids in our youth group at the time when I first went into high school was like they were actual hypocrites. Like, went to church but like didn't really walk the walk kind of thing.
Like most youth.
Yeah, sure. And so I just knew I didn't want to be that way. And so I kind of made a unspoken vow with myself that I wasn't going to do like church and not mean it kind of thing. And I kind of did that at the beginning of high school. My youth pastor wanted students to get involved with the youth band.
Heck yeah, dude.
So I was like, all right.
This is my moment.
I'm not an arrogant guy. Like I'm pretty, as far as like my talents go, like I'm pretty aware, I would say, of like where I'm at. And like, I'm not like cocky about like how good I am. Mm-hmm. But in this moment I was like, I play the drums, I can play bass. I have a bass. I practice bass, so even in that, dude, I think about it. Had my youth pastor said, let's try you out on bass instead of drums, my life would look very different right now because I told him, I was like,
might look like McCaslin.
It really might. I might have a beard.
True.
So
I'm
like, hey, I play bass and I also can play drums a little. Like, I'd like to like give it a shot.
You were a dumb bass player? The heck, dude?
Dude, I had a Dean V bass, bro.
Sick.
It was dope. And
that's the one that went missing.
Yeah, somebody in South Bossier stole it.
Bro, I got $50 off that thing.
Pretty sure Jay Meehan did it.
Yeah, we're talking to you, Jay Meathead.
Yeah, Meathead stole my bass, then acted like he didn't. And it's not a big deal. I'm not, mad about it. It was not an expensive bass, but it was several $100s, and I'd like it back. But
so if you still have it,
I'm still willing to take it back from you because I might could get like $50 for it on Reverb.
Heck yeah.
So anyway, my youth pastor was like, hey, let me try you out on drums. Went to a rehearsal, really sucked, but for some reason they like started letting me play and started playing. And that, I would say, was the pivotal I listened to something the other day that made a lot of sense, and it was talking about anxiety and why we were anxious. And I can remember in that time before that having a lot of anxiety, and I didn't really know to call it anxiety at that point, but just a lot of worry and a lot of like, I don't know, anxiety about like not really feeling a purpose. Like what I was listening to was talking about like where anxiety comes from, and it was saying like the root of anxiety is purposelessness. So like not feeling like you have a purpose in the world, that you have something to contribute, and why like this generation of people now more than ever are more anxious than ever because they have less purpose than they've ever had, kind of thing. It was really interesting. Anyway, but I was thinking about it as I was coming up in high school. That youth band gave me a purpose, and I loved doing it. I really enjoyed it, and I connected with God by doing it, and I didn't ever want to not do it again. And I felt like that was my gift that I could use for the Lord. So I was, from then on, it was like for about a few months in, I was like, yeah, this is it. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to play drums. And at that point, I thought that just meant playing in church, you know. At that point, I wasn't like having crazy dreams.
You didn't realize you're going to be traveling the world.
I didn't even consider that could be a profession, that music in general could be a profession, because you don't grow up and your parents tell you, you know,
you're going to be the next Nickelback.
You don't. You just grow up, you're like, yeah, you could be a pharmacist. You could be a
Coleman
dentist.
are going to be the next Nickelback.
It's single-handedly
Yeah.
going to be Nickelback. Dimeback, if you will. Just kidding. Okay.
Quarterback.
Yeah. Dude, maybe that's where that came from.
They're like, hey, we should call our band Quarterback. Oh, man, we're not that good. How about Nickelback?
Nickelback.
Yeah.
A fifth of a quarterback.
But nickels are bigger than dimes.
That is true. Why is that?
Makes no
And pennies
sense.
are bigger than dimes.
Yeah, just barely.
Yeah. Anyway, so I felt like I found my purpose. Like I was gonna use this gift for the church. And I did. I faithfully served on that youth band, and then pretty soon after that started playing in big church, as we called it. Still call it that.
Sick.
It will never not be big church.
Yeah, it's always big church.
Come on.
So I was doing that deal, and probably junior year of high school, that I'd been playing for several years. I'd been playing since I was a freshman or something, and was very faithful, very much like whenever the church doors were open, was there even after I started driving, that kind of thing. It's funny that Mash mentioned kind of having a vehicle as being a source of
sin,
because it's very, very true.
Because it's
you have the world at your
it's
it's
just
at
kinda
your
like-
it's just
fingertips.
freedom.
when people go to college and they go bad, you at that point you have a large amount of freedom that has been given to you.
And without going into the nitty gritty, that was when I kind of, I was really late. If this is really awkward to talk about, but it was really late, like getting to that point,
Where you
like
liked
where
girls.
I went through my changes very late in life. Let's just say this, okay? Like
Something to be ashamed of,
halfway
Coleman.
through high school is when I'm going through these bodily changes. Okay, everything is changing for me.
He's trying to be transparent. You're just laughing at him, man.
Literally-
Hunter
It's-
says as he gets done laughing.
Like, okay, what I'm
the
saying
heck?
is there's kids in middle school. Like I knew some of my friends in 5th grade who had armpit hair, right?
Yeah.
I didn't get armpit hair until I was at least a sophomore in high
week.
school. At least a sophomore in high school.
Sprouted my
Dang.
first one.
So that's what I'm trying to give you perspective. This is
Evan
the first
still
time
doesn't have armpit hair.
Exactly. This is the first time I'm really having these temptations and
Yeah, man.
these thoughts that I'd never had before. And these girls are just throwing themselves at me.
Because you play the drums.
It's right. I'm just kidding. That didn't happen. But again, from that point on, it began a pathway where I made decisions to say, I'm going to neglect God in my life because I've never experienced this before. And it could, subconsciously, I'm saying, this could be better.
This is pretty lit.
This is pretty good. Okay. So it was kind of a back and forth game for me for like the second half of high school, which I was still I still played in youth band. I don't know where I stand on that. If like morally where I don't know if you're going to find high school students that are like morally crystal perfect.
Not going to happen.
But like I was very much like hiding a ton of guilt. I was very much like doing things that I was super ashamed of, and I didn't like know how to stop. And I just continued to do that through the rest of high school. I remember like graduating high school and being like, this is so childish. Like I have no self-control. I'm such a child. Like why would, at this point I am starting to have like, maybe I could play drums, as a career. I'm having these thoughts, but like I'm too afraid to tell my parents I want to do that. So I'm just going to go to college like everybody else does. And as I'm graduating high school, it kind of comes to a T. I break up with my girlfriend. Well,
sick.
Well, I did break up with her, but she cheated on me first. So sorry if she's listening to this, you're exposed. And so, anyway, I decide after that relationship ended for good. Like it had ended several times. Hunter could probably attest to this. Like anytime I broke up with my girlfriend, I always started hanging out with them more.
I just remember, was she the most?
Like
I don't want to say her name.
Don't say her name. But
was she the most common one throughout high school?
For sure, for sure. I dated her in high school, and I did date one other girl. Well, I dated one other girl, and then had I talked to several other girls, and
I was just making sure it was the one I was thinking.
Yeah, it's for sure the one.
We blamed a lot on her.
And rightfully so.
It's probably all her fault.
And so anyway, so to kind of jump back a little bit, and I'm kind of trying to wrap up here, but to jump back a little bit in that, I'm not going to get into nitty gritty about this because it is very sensitive and whatever, but I never understood why, but I could always tell there was something wrong, like with my dad. Like I never, until I matured a little bit, didn't really know where the source of the issue was, but like I could always tell there was something wrong. Like there was always a source of tension with my dad and his job, and I didn't know why. I didn't really know the ins and outs. And when I became a little older, when I was 17 and 18 years old and started kind of recognizing these problems in the church, I kind of, it's funny to like watch what other people do, like what Rhett and Link, like when they started recognizing these problems in the church, we're just like, none of it's real, which there was more to it. But basically, I'm just like, oh, I just got to find another church. Like I'm just like, oh, sure, this one has some problems. I'm just going to go find a different church. Mm-hmm. So when I graduated high school, I was like, I'm out. So I left and went to another church. And all while this is happening, there's this movement in Shreveport. I'm going to call it a movement. Young Adults for Christ. It's not what it's called, but we called it Through NA Live. That's what it was.
YAFC.
Yeah.
YAFC.
Wow.
Yeah. So I start going to Through NA Live, and I'd gone a couple times as a high schooler, even though you're not supposed to. And it was
we did that too.
There's lit worship, lit word, and it was great. So I was going as, like, when I graduated high school, I started going. And I remember there were several really key things that happened to me at Through NA Live. One of which, I was in a worship service, and one of my favorite worship leaders was leading, Zach Rowe. And I just remember, not in like a vain way, but I remember like worshiping and feeling like that's what I wanted to do. Like I wanted to lead worship. I had never sang in front of anyone. I didn't play an instrument other than drums. And I was like, that kind of seems enticing. Not in like not in like an arrogant way, like I wanted to be on stage because I didn't.
Famous.
Because I didn't, trust me. And I remember like in that moment, I was like having these thoughts and I was like, that is so weird. That is nothing I ever have wanted. And my friend was sitting next to me. You guys know Zane Grantham. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I was sitting next to Zane.
Can we talk about this picture taken at one of the, I think the last 318 Live ever?
The last, yeah.
Where me and Coleman weren't even friends, but we're definitely both there.
Dude, look at
Let me see.
Bro. Dude, we kind of became friends through 318 Live, me and you.
Did we?
We kind of had a couple sets together, I think.
Me and Coleman are on the back row because we're tall boys.
Yeah, no doubt. No,
Yeah, but then you got that whole
the whole original squad. Philip.
I remember when 318 was at
Phillip,
it was
Caleb
in Shreveport.
Carter. Oh yeah. This happened in Shreveport.
Yeah.
So when it moved to Bossier, never was the same. I'm just kidding. But kind of kidding. But so Zane was sitting next to me in that worship service, and I'm having these like thoughts. I'm like, I don't know what this means. Like Mash said, like we have our own thoughts, so you never know. Like what is the Lord like saying right now, and what am I just thinking? And to make things clear, Zane leaned over and said, "The Lord just told me you're going to be a worship leader," and I was like, "Okay, that's interesting because I've never wanted that." And I was just having these thoughts. Interesting moment. Fast forward, I'm a worship leader now. Hello. So another crazy thing that happened at 318 Live was I was in a worship service and I was supposed to be going to tech. It was the summer after I graduated. I was supposed to be going to tech with Jay Pizzle and another friend of ours, Austin, that we've probably heard we've talked about on this podcast before because me and him and JP were always together. And so we were all going to room together. It was going to be great, whatever. Never really felt fully on board with that, but I was just going to do that because that's what you do when you graduate high school. You go to college, right?
Yep.
And you want to go with your friends so that lonely sixth grade Coleman doesn't have to be alone again. And so
amen.
We figured it all out. It's the summer before. Like, it's getting to be, like, very close.
Yeah.
And I remember being in a worship service very, very clearly and distinctly, the Lord telling me, do not go to tech. And I was like, I don't want to hear that because that's my plan right now, and I don't want to have to redo my plans.
God,
that's
I'm like about to go there. Like,
yeah,
right
like
now.
that's about to happen in like a month, and like my friends
But
are
you
gonna
stop me
pissed.
though?
Yeah, so like I'm like crap.
Don't
I don't
ask him to.
So I'm like, oh God, please, is this really? And I knew it was. So I was like, well, guess I got to call JP and tell him. And so after the service, I went like in the hallway and I was like, called JP and I was like, hey, bro, yeah, I can't go to tech anymore. Sorry.
And
he was like,
my dad said I can't go.
My father, who art in heaven, told me I couldn't go. And so I told him, he was like super cool about it and was like, yeah, I get it, bro. Like, and he ended up going out to eat with us after the service and stuff. It's cool. Cool night. So it didn't go to tech, right? So what am I going to do? I guess I'm going to go to LSUS because it's in town.
Sick.
So
yes,
go to LSUS. Freaking hate that place. I wish it would burn to the ground. Just kidding. Don't take that to the police.
If it ever burns
down, I was just joking. But I was going to a church at this time, not the church I'd always been at. Kind of like my first thing that I did when I graduated high school. Went to this church. RP. Good old RP. My boy Daniel, who I'd played in youth band with, was the youth pastor. And so, yeah, I started going there. Got plugged in pretty quickly. And so I pretty much started playing on a weekly basis very, very quickly. Like twice a week, actually. And so I'm loving it, though. Like, I really enjoy it because I'm getting to play drums, and it's, like, more the style that I'm, like, attracted to, you know. So all this, there's a bunch of crazy stuff that happened in that time in my life that I could sit here and tell you time after time that the Lord, like, did just crazy stuff in my own heart and in other people's hearts. We were in, like, a small group that we were seeing, like, miracles happen And if you're listening and you're like, that kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore, it does. I've seen it with my own two eyes and heard it with my own two ears. And so I'm going to get back to my notes because I'm rambling. But this is we're basically getting to where I would call like the end of my story, which is like,
All right, you got 5 minutes.
yeah, I'm getting there, bro.
Sorry.
So told me not to go to tech. What did I do from not going to tech? Went to River Park. I met my wife, who now we have a kid and another kid on the way. Like that alone would have changed complete. If I'd gone to tech, that would have completely changed the trajectory of my life. Would not have met my wife. Would not have moved
You might
to
have married
Nashville
somebody
eventually.
named Tanya.
It could have. Could have married several
happened.
other people that probably.
Stay away from Tanya.
Wait, what?
She's mine.
Oh, okay.
I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Another? Gosh. So soon.
Okay. Okay.
That's for the patrons. For the patrons. We're going to cut that one. That came out. That was in my flesh. We're going to return to this. Okay. So I moved to Nashville eventually. That was that.
Live the Nashville
I
dream.
lived that Nashville life. Did see some crazy stuff happen in Nashville too, because the church I went to was a little on the charismatic side, I'll admit. And yeah, but great times. And eventually, I will say, one big thing that happened in Nashville was I was kind of back at my lonely, depressed 6th grade self because I knew no one. I had no one except my roommate that I knew, and didn't really have any money to go and make. Like, it cost, at this point, like gas was astronomically high, like $5 a gallon. And so I couldn't really go out because then I had to use gas and I didn't have any money. So, like I couldn't make friends really, wasn't going anywhere, was really lonely. Wrote the song Deeper in that time, which a few years later, me and Hunter produced and released. And yeah, just a good, that song, I listened to it the other day, just really good for this time. I don't know why. It's really good. Not because of me, the Lord. It was Holy Spirit inspired. But since then, I got married, had a kid, which is a miracle in itself, just that kids are miracles. I will say more recently, a miracle, which if we're just saying like, building blocks to like the God's faithfulness and realness in our life, Molly and I had a miscarriage in between the kid that we're expecting now and Ada. And that's just something that I would not wish on anybody. It's just like a horrible, like depressing thing to happen. It's something that until it happens to you, you just like really don't think it's ever gonna happen to you. And it happens, but like you don't really expect it to happen. And it did, and it was really hard. And at that point, we really didn't know. And I know people have like chronic miscarriages, and we only had one. And I'm not trying to make light of that, but we didn't know if that meant we were never going to be able to have kids again. We didn't know if that was like a red flag in our fertility. We didn't know if we were going to have chronic fertility issues. We had a lot of questions at that point, and the Lord was just really faithful in, we got pregnant really quick after that. And again, I'm not trying to make light of other people's situations because I know people go through that and it's a really heavy deal and they never can have kids. And that's really, really sad. But just in my own heart and life, it was just a time that I was reminded of God's faithfulness and hand in my life. And yeah. So that brings us to today. And that was a bit of a rambling mess on my part. But yeah, all of those moments put together have convinced me, along with the Bible and other things, that God is real and that He cares about me and He loves me and He cares about whoever's listening to this and loves them. So if you're having doubts that He could be real, he's real. I'm going to just tell you. And he loves you. And I'm done. So if you guys have anything to
That's
say,
good.
then you can.
My
'Cause-
only thing to say to remind anyone listening is that we're not telling these stories because our faith and God's existence is not conditional and does not rely upon experiential evidence
Sure.
or things that we have experienced. Those do not define God's immanence or his just ultimate existence, but instead they are these are the things that we have to offer personally. These are auxiliary accounts that go along with what God has revealed through his word, just in order to reinforce and to testify to what we already know to be true. So just wanted to add
Good
that.
stuff.
Well, this has been another great episode of Life in the Pocket. We'll see you guys later.
Nice.
Peace.
Nice.